You write about Plato's cave, and this is interesting because it relates to, it's a story that helps us understand the importance of distrusting elites, which is something you mentioned just a couple minutes ago. Can you get into that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is kind of the original virtual reality dystopia is Plato's cave, and we're all already living in it is sort of the idea. Plato famously in the Republic, Book 7, he talks about this cave where all of humanity is shackled and all they can see is shadows on a wall. There's a fire and there are kind of puppet masters that manipulate the shadows. So people think that's reality. But the truth is that actually outside the cave, the sun is shining, and that's the true light, which is the beautiful and the good, which we only dimly and at a distance see reflected in the sort of day-to-day experience that we might have. And I think one of the things that is so powerful about that image is that it gives you a third-person outsider's view. It lets you see that even though the people in the cave think they're perceiving reality, they're actually at the whim of the powerful, people who have just one more degree of information and power than they do. And as we start to play around with the virtual reality idea, as it becomes more and more possible to think about ourselves quote unquote in the metaverse, or uploading our consciousness into some kind of virtual reality cloud, suddenly this idea, which has been the subject of dystopian horror for centuries, becomes like a sales pitch. It becomes, oh, this is something we should all like and want to do. And I think if we look back to Plato's cave, and if we even look back to, stories after that, which have kind of followed on, like, The Matrix or Wall-E or these other kind of Snow Crash, these sort of dystopian fiction stories that we've written, they show us our intuition of something which is really true, which is that if you give up the ability to determine true and false, if you give it over, you're always giving it over to somebody. And that person has interests of his own, which might or might not be entirely salutary. So when somebody comes and says to you, digital tech has made it so there's no need for true and false anymore. You can just have everything you want if you will simply strap on these goggles and live in a virtual reality. The alarm that I'm sounding in this book, and that I think Plato is sounding, and all of these, sort of fiction writers after him, is, that's always a bum deal, because the person that you're handing over your data to, handing over your mind to, handing control over to, has his own agenda. And that's the elites that you're talking about. As people begin to discover that elites are actually not infallible, and in fact they have many of the same kind of sins and temptations that just you and I have, I think it's really healthy and salutary that we're realizing, actually these guys are not gods. They're not beyond the problems that mankind has faced for generations, and maybe we should think twice before we hand over our lives to them.
I'm thinking about this exchange I had. I've mentioned this to the audience before. At the beginning of COVID, when Trump had that very weird, disjointed news conference where he was like, I'm shutting down all travel. And then they're like, no, I'm not shutting down all travel. Like he had like 5 things he had to correct as soon as the press conference was over. Right. I remember tweeting out something to the effect of, I wish I knew who to trust. I recognize I cannot trust what he is saying, but I also recognize I cannot trust what the media is saying about him and about this virus either, because they have an agenda prior to an election and just getting him out and saying whatever he says is wrong. And it was a great frustration that I recognized early on in COVID, and many people shared. And I love Ann Curry, by the way. She's such a sweet person, and think the world of her. But at the time, she tweeted sort of at me, trust the WHO, the CDC, Anthony Fauci. And this was early enough in the pandemic. We weren't yet where we are on them. You know what I mean? Like most of us sort of, you had to be lied to repeatedly before the light bulb went off with these organizations. But I remember being like, And to your point, like, think of that. It's the same kind of thing. There's this group that you're supposed to trust. They're the elites. And supposedly they had a little bit more information than we had in the cave. And yet they didn't. And a healthy distrust was very much warranted. And now, most of our view of these people and these groups has completely changed, at least for most people on the right and in the center of the country.
That's right. And it's been transformative. It's been transformative for me, that's for sure. I mean, I would have been much more sympathetic to somebody saying trust the WHO before the pandemic.
Yeah.
than I would be now. And it's because, the human beings, the fallible human beings who make up those institutions have betrayed our trust. And that's not, that's something that has happened in the past. Machiavelli says that when the elites betray the trust of the people, they do two kinds of damage. They damage their own credibility, but they also damage the credibility of the regime, of the country or the nation that they are a part of. And that's why it's so evil, is because we don't just lose our faith in this or that governing body, we also lose our faith in the whole kind of structure of power that we're supposed to be kind of believing in and participating in.
Like many people, I am eating healthier these days, trying to. And that's why I love good olive oil. And by good, I mean fresh. Olive oil packs the most flavor and the healthiest nutrients when it's fresh from the farm. And that's the problem with supermarket olive oils. They're not fresh. They can sit on the shelf for months, growing stale and stale and still staler. This is why I like my olive oil direct from small award-winning farms, thanks to a guy named TJ Robinson. This really is a deal changer. Also known as the olive oil hunter. When I tasted TJ's farm fresh oils, I fell in love with their vibrant, grassy flavors. They're delicious on salads, veggies, pasta, fish, meat, you name it. As an introduction to his fresh pressed olive oil club, TJ's willing to send you a full-size bottle worth $39 of one of the world's finest artisanal olive oils for just $1 to help him cover shipping. Best of all, there's never a commitment to buy anything, and you can cancel your membership at any time. Get your free $39 bottle for just $1 in shipping and taste the difference freshness makes. Go to harvestfreshnow.com. harvestfreshnow.com for a free bottle and pay just $1 in shipping. harvestfreshnow.com. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.